underway. So with that, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to Tom Foord. Tom's a contractor safety professional with Openreach. It will come as no surprise to any of you that Openreach undertake huge numbers of excavations every year. Tom's going to tell us about their specific processes when these excavations take them into the proximity of hazardous pipelines. So with that, over to you, Tom.
Brilliant. Cheers, mate. Right, well, morning, everyone. So thank you, first of all, for coming on. You've got the pleasure of listening to my lovely voice for, I think the call's in for about an hour. So congratulations. Well done, you lot. Now, I'm going to, as we go through, I am going to turn my camera off because experiences I've had carrying out health and safety audits virtually over the last year, just it's a bit of a nightmare for myself. Plus, I'd rather be you looking at me slides than my ugly face. So, right, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just give us a shout when we can see it.
Yeah, got it, Tom.
You've got that. And is that just so I know, is that just in the screen completely, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right, lovely. Okay. So no, thanks for the introduction there. So as Fiona mentioned, my name's Tom Foord, and I'm a contractor safety professional over at Openreach. Now, part of my job is the day-to-day running of the health and safety management of all of our suppliers. Currently, we're engaging with around, I think the last count was around 50 plus suppliers. That's tier one, so that first level supplier that we're engaging with at Openreach. Now, of that 50, not all of them carry out excavation. I think I've got around 12 or 13 tier one suppliers that carry out excavation. And based on that, they need to meet a certain amount of requirements that we ask of them when it comes to carrying out any kind of dig. And with that meaning they must have a high pressure pipeline process and policy in place on how that's managed. So that's just a little bit about me and my current role. So I'm just going to scoot onto the next slide. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a brief background on myself. So who's Tom Foord, right? You've seen it on LinkedIn and, it's been mentioned this morning. It's been on the emails. Who's Tom Foord? So essentially, I just want to give you a quick background on my career and how I came to be where I am today. So on the slide there, we can see on the left-hand side, I'm a former Royal Marines Commando. I spent 8 years in the Royal Marines, specialised in solely 2 areas. So first half of my career was around reconnaissance, and the second part of my career was in counter-terrorism. Now, quite the opposite of health and safety, you would say. Why would someone that spent a lifetime kicking doors in now worry about the health and safety? But hey, flips and roundabouts for everyone in life, right? So I did that for 8 years, and then I moved into the private security sector, like a lot of former military personnel. I didn't go out and do close protection because I'd kind of done enough of that stuff in my previous career. I went on to the ships, and a lot of you may have seen in the news, maybe you've even seen the film Captain Phillips. I went on to maritime security, protecting merchant vessels from pirate attack in the Indian Ocean. I did that for roughly 4 years as a consultant out on merchant vessels. And decided that I'd had enough and I needed to have a change. And Openreach came along. Now, the reason why I've put a picture of my family in there is what Openreach has actually given me. I've had all the fun that, not everyone, but what I personally considered a lifetime of fun up until that point, being me, doing all this good stuff. But Openreach now give me the opportunity to be that one thing that I really, really want, and that was to be a father, and actually be a husband to my wife and be at home, and create that family. So that's a little bit about me and where I come from. So moving swiftly on then. So for me, why is this important to us working near hazardous pipelines? So I just kind of want to paint a picture for you, really, and apologies if I'm teaching you to suck eggs because I don't really know the audience. But for us, it is really important. Now, this picture here is the aftermath of a pipeline strike in the States in 2010. Now, if you just look at the picture, that's 1 kilometre wide. And what I'd like you to do is just to imagine that 1 kilometre blast area, put that over the top of where you live today. How many schools that maybe even your own children attend or family members attend? Is there a hospital that's in your local area, or even put that over the area where the hospital is? What other things are surrounding there? How many lives would be affected? How many of your family members' lives would be affected from this actually happening where you live? So it's a really strong sort of message, and that's why it's important, not just for myself, because I've actually been in the vicinity when things have gone bang, and I've had first-hand accounts of destruction and the devastation that this can cause, not from just the role that I was doing at that particular time, but the civilians that actually lived in that particular area. It's pretty devastating. So your reasons for not wanting this to happen here is exactly the same as ours, right? So I just kind of want to paint that picture on why this is important to us, because it's not just from a financial or necessarily a reputational perspective. It all comes down to, at the end of the day, we want everybody to be going home safe, and we want people to be safe in their homes while we're working as well. So an overview then into Openreach. Now, some of you may not know, it may be the case for some of your organisations, but working near hazardous pipelines, or as we shorten it to HPP, is actually Openreach's #1 health and safety risk. This is the biggest risk to us as a business. Now, we carry out literally thousands of excavations on a daily basis, and I'd say in the last 12 to 18 months we've seen an increase in near misses. I mean, we've gone from 5 to 6. So I think, overall, I think given the amount of excavation that we actually do, I think the near miss rate we've got is still pretty low, to be honest, and that's just down to the stringent nature of what we do and how we manage it as a business. Now, we carry out these thousands and thousands of excavations, and in so many cases we are very, very close to, or in the vicinity of an HPP, not just HPP, but also other high risk assets, right? So we look at your intermediate gas, we're looking at your high voltage electrics and your high pressure water mains, things like this. These all get factored into what we consider a hot job, and I'll explain that a little bit more later on when we're working within this zone of interest. Now, it's not just us as direct labour, Openreach, that are carrying out the excavations. As I've already mentioned, we have up to 50 odd suppliers, and probably around 12 or 13 of those, and I'm currently in the process of onboarding 2 new suppliers to carry out civils on our behalf that also do this. So they're a massive contributing factor to the volume of how often we're putting spades in the ground. Now, this is all around the amount of people that we've got and the amount of digs that we're doing also comes to, you will have seen it in the news, there's a massive ramp up to do the fibre build, so we can get all of those total homes passed and move everyone over onto fibre. So we're having to use, you can see from the picture, various different methods of excavating, and potentially, you know, some of you use the same methods, right? So I've just put 2 pictures in there just as an example, but we've got various different other pieces of equipment. So it's not just about the spades that we put in the ground. We're also using big machinery now to actually carry out this excavation. However, it doesn't take away that we still maintain an extremely high level of the basics. You know, working to HSG 47, you know, we try to, in every sense possible, make everything as safe as we possibly can. And being very, very good at the basics will set you in very, very good stead moving forward. Because if you're not any good at the basics and you start putting big machines in the ground and they're just churning up, you know, a kilometre at a time, you know, if you aren't good at those basics, you're going to hit something. So it's really, really important for us that we do that. And obviously, the amount of holes that we are putting in the ground, you're massively increasing your chances of coming across something and potentially striking it, which can have devastating effects, right? But I think with the amount of holes that we are putting in the ground, I don't know what we would be like compared to other organisations that perhaps excavate as much as us. You know, I think maybe 5 to 6 near misses in sort of 12 to 18 month period, I think is quite low. But if I'm wrong, please tell me. So that's a little bit of an overview there of us in Openreach. Now, how we provide information to our people, how we train our people is really, really, really important. And just recently, when I actually joined the team, I was given a little project, and that little project was to remove a thing called the zone of interest matrix. And the guys from LSBUD will probably be aware of the zone of interest matrix that we had. It was a extensive spreadsheet that had numerous asset owners listed on there and what asset they had, and a level of guidance on what to do next. But it was extremely difficult to manage. We were giving this to our suppliers. The only updates at the time when I came in that were able to be made was when someone new was identified, and then those updates were made. But it was like maybe 4 or 5 separate sheets for the different lines of business, including the suppliers. They all had to be updated, and because it was very manual and it was all done off a hard copy, you had to make sure that you'd send that out to everybody that was on the distribution list for this zone of interest matrix, which was just a guidance tool, right? But we were finding that some people, when we were carrying out our assurance, was that people were actually still using an older version. So the governance of this information, it wasn't lacking. It's kind of, sometimes that's what happens when you're operating a very manual process, right? But the good thing was we identified it and we were able to do something about it. So I was given the task to look at how we can remove this spreadsheet and create a, for what better of a word, a one truth guidance. However, I went down a rabbit hole, and it was a big rabbit hole, right? You know, like I said, Openreach are very stringent, and we had lots of stuff around working near hazardous pipelines. And the one thing I found doing my health and safety assurance on it was it needed consolidating into one place. So what turned from removing something turned into a complete overhaul of our entire process and our guidance on working in the vicinity of high pressure pipelines and other hazardous assets. So I revamped the whole process. So with that, if you change information that you're giving to your people, you need to make sure it's landed correctly. And the only way you can really do that to make sure that it's landed, they understand, is by also revamping your training course. So I'd looked at that, and it was really good for what it was. You know, it showed how to use LSBUD, because we're very big advocates. We wouldn't be on here if we wasn't. And it showed people how to run line searches. It told you what to look for, but it didn't really go into the detail that we would really need. So what was really nice for me, this brand new policy and process that I'd just written and overhauled, was used to create an all singing, all dancing new training course, which we've managed to split down. And I'd like to say straight away, that's way above what my capabilities are. I'm a caveman and a club stick. We've got an L&D department that managed to create all this for me. So, you know, all hats off to them. But it was all built around that policy. And whereas before everybody did the same thing, I've created 3 separate learner pathways now. So regardless of which step you sit within working in the zone of interest, whether you're in the validation team, so the people that are running the service prints, they're running the LSBUD search, you know, they're doing all of that good stuff. They're making sure that the job pack that's been created and the work points actually match up with the searches that are done. Whether you're the hot job monitor, I'll go into more sort of detail on this in a couple of slides, but you know, if you're the hot job monitor, the person that manages that task when it's actually confirmed it's within the zone of interest, or if you're a field operative and you're actually the person on the ground that's digging, you know, this training course now tells you exactly what it is you need to do, and it tells you exactly where to find the right information for you to be able to carry out your job effectively. Now, it ain't going to mean too much, but where we removed the zone of interest matrix, the 2 real big key parts, I created what I call the positive zone of interest actions, which essentially is that big massive spreadsheet that I talked about that was sheets and sheets and full of everything else. I'd got rid of that and provided a single guidance on what to do. And it's guidance, right? Because we still need to do that extra due diligence just to make sure, but guidance on what they should do depending on what type of asset they've found. You know, is it a high pressure pipeline? Then you must follow this and do this, this, and this. If it's, you know, a low pressure water main to a property, then you can just actually, it's not a hot job, you can just carry on using safe digging techniques, right? And then what I also did as well was provided a little bit more guidance. I'd done some research around various different websites on how you can look at who that local utility provider is. So once you've done your line search, nothing's come up, but we're looking at our blue list. Well, I don't know who that person is. Right, I can look in here, and I've given access to all those links. So I'm just giving that little bit of it, as much information you can give someone to ensure they can do their job the best possible way. So that there were 2 massive key changes for that guidance, if you like. Now, with the 3 separate pathways we've got for the training course, I actually split that into 4 separate tests. So a works originator is your person that designs the work, essentially, right? So an engineer needs to, in our sense, I'll talk about copper, right? So an engineer's gone out and he's found a fault, but he needs to have a dig in the carriageway, or sorry, in the footpath to repair that fault, right? So we need to dig in there. He creates an A55 document, which has got like a screenshot. Do you know what? I'm waving my hands around like you can see me, but I've just realised that I turned my camera off, didn't I? So yeah, they'll go and mark it all up. They'll take pictures and they'll send it all in. That works originator, they will then have a look at it. They'll do an initial line search, and then they'll fire that job in. Now, when it comes into the works allocation, it's divided into two parts. So you've got a validator, as I'd already mentioned, the person who runs the safe dig prints. We get hold of all of them. We do the line search. We check the job. We check the coordinates to make sure everything's in the right place. They'll do a separate test, but then we've also got the hot job monitor, and the test at the end of that is far more stringent, well, not far more stringent, but far more challenging, because that's the person that's got overall control of that task when it is confirmed within the zone of interest. So we created two separate, although they've got the same learner pathway, but the depth of knowledge that they need to retain from that course is of a much higher level, because it needs to be, because we're getting closer and closer and closer, and we're losing gate checks. You know, when it's right back at the start, we've got lots of steps in place to hopefully, you know, plan out the risk. You know, and as the further we go along, the moment they hit that button to release the job, we need to make sure everything's absolutely all singing, all dancing. So that's a little bit on how we give information to our people and how we train our people. So moving on to next. So the next stage in the process is around how we actually allocate the work to our people, right? So we implemented a IT-based solution for managing jobs within the zone of interest. Essentially, for us, one of the most important things is to design out as much risk as possible. And that will be the same for yourselves, I would imagine, in your organisations, right? We want to get rid of as much risk. And by implementing an IT-based solution, we're removing one of the fundamental issues, and that's human error. And that's one of the fundamental flaws of us as human beings, right? We make mistakes. So by implementing a system, we've got a system here called DepotNet. We brought that in, and it's got a series of gate checks that you can't progress through until you've completed those. So where it comes to, you've got your line search, and it has to be uploaded to the job pack. Excuse me. Yeah, it has to be uploaded to the job pack. You physically have to upload it before it lets you move any further forward. So just a little bit about DepotNet itself, right? So it has multiple different functions. You know, you can carry out, you know, if you're a health and safety professional, it gives you the opportunity to carry out audits and record everything. It allows you to measure performance, because you can get all those outputs from, say, supervisory checks that you're doing online. You can put all this function in there, and it manages multiple different types of work streams. I mean, you can see from the picture there, right? So there's lots of different things that it can do, lots of functionalities. However, the main thing that we're really concerned with is that it can do is it will quarantine a task. Now, this is a fundamental part for us, is the ability for, we've confirmed it, it's in the zone of interest, it's near a high pressure pipeline. It gets put into a quarantine queue and nobody can touch it. It is no longer visible to operations. And that's another thing that we do with our hot job teams, is they're completely separate from operations. We don't like to have that interference, because we know what it's like when we need to deliver work and we need to deliver it on time. If things are running behind, human nature is to try and hurry things along. And if this job that's near a high pressure pipeline has turned into a tail job that's been there for 3 weeks, you know, and someone's being cracked with a whip to make sure we hit our numbers, you know, we want to make sure nobody's got influence over that job whatsoever. So the ability to quarantine it and make it completely invisible to anyone is a massive must for us. And with that as well, it's strictly down to permission based only. So only the dedicated hot job monitor and the manager will have access to that queue. Nobody else has got it. So for us, that is absolutely critical. And what it does, it ensures that we can get all that due diligence done and check that all the correct information is there. So if we need to have a site meet with that asset owner, for example, they've said, yeah, no worries with you doing it. However, we want to meet you first. And then everything that's discussed goes onto that form, the time, the date that needs to be done, certain requirements, if they want to fully supervise the entire task, all of that goes on that form. But with it being quarantined, it means we can button everything up before we actually release it to the field. So the quarantine feature, and I can't hop on it about enough, is really, really important. But what it also means is we can have that controlled release of the task. So that goes out when it's 110% good to go and not before, because that's where we see a lot of issues, right? Is if operations can see it, or I'd say another line of business. So streetworks, for example, if they need to raise a notice, we don't want them to be able to get hold of any single part of that job. So by keeping it in that quarantine, it ensures that we can only release that job when it's absolutely necessary to do so. I've put the skull and crossbones on there. You might be thinking, is this something to do with his previous job, pirate fighting and all that? But it's not, right? This is an extra layer of control that we have in place. So this is more for the operatives on the ground that are actually doing the digging. We watermark a job pack from page 1 all the way to page whatever it is at the very end. And that's watermarked throughout. So you can physically have something there that you can see that goes, yeah, this, if you're not supposed to have a hot job and you see something with skull and crossbones on, you'll be thinking, why has my job pack got skull and crossbones on? That means something bad. I best ring up and ask what's going on here. And then clearly there's lots of other questions. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions why that person's got it that should that doesn't even know what it's for. So yeah, so that's just a little extra layer of control that we have in place. So moving on next then. This for me, how we supervise our people is the backbone, right? I don't know about yourselves with your own organisations, but this for me, this is where we earn our money, right? Supervising people on the ground is key. Now, carrying out some of my health and safety assessments, not necessarily talking about HPP now, I'm talking overall health and safety stuff. And sometimes when you look at the supervisory checks that are carried out, they can be tick box exercise, right? But for me, and certainly for Openreach, tick box exercises don't really tell you much. In Openreach, we created a series of supervisory checks that create engagement, because that's what's really, really key, is the engagement with the operative that you're actually doing it. And we don't just do it for a gang, which I've also seen within some organisations, is that, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? They'll check a gang, but that's not assessing the level of competence and the depth of knowledge of each person, because everyone's got a pivotal role when you're working within a gang carrying out a particular task, right? So we've created a series of checks that spark that conversation, that really get you underneath how deep is their knowledge around what they're actually doing. Someone can turn around and go, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm putting in here and I need to look for this, I need to do that. Well, that's great, but do you really understand why what you're doing is what you're doing? And I just wanted to bring out some of it. So we can actually carry out this 4 fundamental checks for someone that goes and puts a spade in the ground, right? And that is, we check the desk-based people. So they'll only have one, but they're desk-based and not actually physically carrying out the role, right? So there's a supervisory check, an 812 HPP for desk, and that will go through a series of questions, but they're all broken down into like 3 other layers that can help you assess that level of knowledge. For the guys and girls on the ground, we've got a dedicated check for how to use a cat and jenny, how we can actually locate underground services, and that covers the use of prints, and every other piece of equipment that you've got at your disposal to ensure that we don't damage anything, and we keep people safe, and they get to go home safe as well. We've got an 832, which covers excavation itself. Now, this is broken down into various different methods. So obviously we've got our pole erection units, and they've got an auger on it. So there'll be parts in around that. We have people using mechanical diggers, and it will go down to using a spade in the ground. And finally, we've got the signing light in the garden, and that will go through absolutely everything. So how the site's set up, ensuring that everything's correct. But again, the fundamental part, and sort of harp on it a little bit more, is it really gauges that depth of knowledge. And it's not just about telling people that they've got it wrong, you know, because if somebody doesn't know, they don't know, right? And it's your opportunity to educate them then. But what these checks also have a positive for, because people look at supervision like a bad thing, always coming to check me, I better not get anything wrong. But it gives you the opportunity to educate, but it also gives you the opportunity to praise when things are right. And that's something that's missing, I think, from supervision. There's not enough praise given for the stuff that people are doing right. And they tend to get hit with a big stick too much for when they're getting it wrong, you know. But that's a whole culture piece, right? And it's how you change that. And when we're talking about excavation, we're all here because we've got an interest in this type of thing, right? It's how we change that culture and we bring people into it. And yes, we need them to understand that it's really, really important that you don't get it wrong, but we need them to have the confidence that they can do things safely. And if they don't know, you want to create an environment where someone can actually stick the hand up and say proactively, you know, because that's where you want to be. You want to be proactive, not reactive. They want to go, I don't know. That's no problem. It's this, and this. You need to do this. Oh, you need to move your pole 5 meters in that direction. Right, that's fine, but you need to send the job back because we don't move it more than 3 meters from the original plan position. You know, stuff like that. If they don't know, they don't know. So for me, this is the backbone to how we operate in Openreach. It's the supervision, it's the people on the ground. You know, that's because if something's going to go wrong, that's fundamentally where it's going to go wrong big time. So massively key part for me, and I'm quite passionate. You probably tell I'm quite passionate about that part. So yeah, so that's how we supervise our people. Now, I've kind of flown through there. I realise we're only on 36 minutes, but I'm kind of on to my last piece, right? So I've mentioned before, it's not just about our direct labour. I've chucked, just to name a few, of our suppliers, our tier 1 suppliers on this slide, right? And we hold our suppliers to the same standards of what we do within Openreach. If anything, it can be a little bit more stringent because, as we talked about, the further you get down the line, the less gate checks you got. And the further away you get from source, you always lose a certain element of grip because you're relying on trust, right? So we can go and audit processes and, you know, we can go and visit people on the ground. But when you're not there, and that goes for anything in life, right? When you're not there, you can only take it for what it is. But with our suppliers, we do exactly the same thing. So one of the things I did when I came in and I sort of took over this role for the hazardous pipeline process, what I found was everyone's got their own thing and it's all slightly different, and the way they operate is all slightly different. So I thought to myself, well, if someone comes in and they've never done a policy or have a stringent process like us, because we're always trying to raise the bar, right? Because, you know, I'm hoping there's stuff that you're going to be able to tell me on this call that I can take away and implement in Openreach, right? Because we can all learn from each other. But some people have never written anything before. So, I mean, I created that's a bit going out on a limb and saying, but what good looks like, right? So I created a policy, a guidance template, what a good HPP policy looks like. Now, I'll give that to a particular supplier, and they can use it in any way they wish, but it needs to fit with their business. So they need to go away and create their own that fits with the way that they work, because I'm very aware that everyone does things slightly different. everybody has a slightly different system. But fundamentally, if we retain those basics, and like I said at the beginning, if everyone is really good at the basics, then everything else should flourish. We don't ever want to sacrifice on being good at the basics, and that is having a good core, fundamental base knowledge of what we're doing. So they have their own policies. I would go out. So if it's a brand new supplier, I'll carry out an initial hazardous pipeline process assessment. Well, I'll go and sit down. It takes around 5, maybe 6 hours to go through all their documentation. But then I like to go and sit with the people actually doing the job and assess. Not assess is the wrong word, because I don't like to put people under that pressure. I like them to just do their normal day-to-day job and have a chat with them. But I've got an ulterior motive. You know, there's things that I'm looking for, because they're the ones that are processing this work. They're the ones that are checking the coordinates to make sure we're actually digging in the right place. Make sure that we've used the correct search tool from LSBUD. You know, we're not using a circular search tool for a 500 meter long polling route or a 500 meter ducted section, you know, that we're digging into the ground. So that's a massive key part. And I'll go through that process end to end. And sometimes it can take up to 6 weeks for a new supplier that's coming on. It can take 6, maybe 8 weeks in some senses, to actually get that process embedded and live and running. And then on a yearly basis with all of my existing suppliers, I go out and excuse me, I go out and check everything again. And I don't just sample check either, because, you know, the due diligence that goes into it, you can't just sample bits and pieces. So I'll run the whole thing. You know, I'll sit there with them for 5-6 hours and I'll go through the full lot, because as well, not just whether the paperwork's changed, the people may have changed, you know. So you're now reassessing the level of competence and knowledge of your suppliers around this new work stream. They might have only been doing it for a few months, but they haven't told us that they brought someone new in because they haven't changed any policy. And that's another key thing that we do. Once the suppliers have got their policy in and it's up and running and we're all cooking on gas, they can't make changes to their signed off policy and process without first informing the Director of Health and Safety within Openreach, just so we can make sure that it's not conflicting, but it's also a positive, because it could be that they've come up with some new innovation that is going to massively help speed up but maintain the integrity of the safety and the basics of what we're trying to do. So it could be that actually we can, I'll definitely use it within Openreach. You know, I'm massively big on shared learning. Now, if any of the other suppliers, that could be really helpful to them as well, because we've all got the same goal in mind. We've all got the same interests at heart, which is making sure everyone goes home safe and we aren't damaging these assets. So anything that we can share is a good thing. So it's, you know, the fact that we're telling you must tell us, but it's also for good reasons as well, right? Just thinking back to DepotNet. Now, this is one of the other fundamental musts that our suppliers have to have. They have to have that IT-based solution. So we raise the bar, we hold everybody to the same standards, right? We can't allow anything to slip. So we ensure that all of our suppliers have got that IT-based solution. Now, they don't have to use DepotNet. A lot of them have their own integrated systems that they've built themselves and they've made in-house. Personally, I quite like those because when you're carrying out an audit, if something's not right, they can implement them changes like that. And it's at very little cost to them as a business. Sometimes if it's a off-the-shelf system, it may be that particular fix has to do the roundhouse of everybody that uses that system before it can be implemented. So it comes with its own challenges using like an off-the-shelf one. That's tendency why I quite like the in-house built systems. But they have to have it. If they don't, it's a non-starter until that's in place. So that's some of the stuff that we do with our suppliers. They do everything that I've already talked about in terms of what Openreach are doing, and we just make sure we hold them to the same standards, right? And they do a cracking job, and they do massively contribute to the level of the amount of excavations that Openreach carry out. So the more digging we're doing, the more the risk increases. But the bottom line is, as long as you can stick to the basics and do them well, we should be able to achieve everything we need to achieve in the safest possible way, moving into the future. So that for me concludes the little presentation. So you can all relax in your chairs now and go, I don't have to listen to his silly voice anymore or waffling on. Look, has anyone got any questions, anything they want to ask, or not even just questions they want to ask me? Have you got anything you'd like to share back with me? Because I'm really interested to hear if you carry out this type of thing, what you do, if you've got any personal experiences that you'd like to share. I think it's a good opportunity, given that you're on this call, it means you're like-minded, that perhaps we can share amongst ourselves sort of some best practice that everyone else does. But so I'm open to, well, I'm not open to anything you want to ask me, but I'm certainly open to questions.
Brilliant.
So thank you very much.
No, thank you. And that's a great job, cracking job of getting through that in 40 minutes. So much to cover. We'll strike while the iron's hot. We've had loads of questions in, and you've really stimulated some good conversation there. So what I'd like to do first, though, is just take you up on that. And has anybody got any immediate feedback that they'd like to put to Tom? If not, we'll move to the questions because there are plenty of those.
Golden. Silence is golden, mate.
Fine. We've got
Hi Tom. I'm Luke Smith. I'm from Vivax Metrotech. We manufacture cats and jennies and things like that. Just a quick one with regards to the high pressure pipelines. In my experience, most of the HP and IP pipes are cathodically protected.
Yeah.
Within that cathodic protection, you can locate that CP signal. Plus, also along the route is various test posts.
Yeah.
You can attach your jenny to those test posts and locate those pretty easily.
Yes.
Is that something that the guys are aware of when they get the packs from LSBUD? Get the plans from LSBUD. Is that you could go and find a test post and then locate those and mark them out before any excavations? Is that something?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. So all of our engineers all attend I can't think which the full name of the course, but essentially everyone is NERSRA accredited for excavation, right? And part of that is the use of the cat and jenny. We also run our own in-house courses as well. Now, sometimes track and locate in telecoms cables can be extremely difficult. And that is one of the little hints, tips and tricks that we will use to locate our cables. And that's the same for anything. So they're trained and they are competent to utilize their equipment to the absolute maximum. So, we're not in the business of just grabbing a cat out and wanging away. They are absolutely not encouraged. It's a must to utilize their equipment to its fullest. So getting that jenny out, and if it means we can link up to something to help track and locate, then yes, they absolutely do that.
Lovely. Thanks, Tom. Thanks.
Does that answer the question, Luke?
Yeah, like I say, I mean, it's something that sort of not a lot of people are aware of. These test posts are sort of sitting there on the side of the road, and you can just link your jenny up. That's a perfect place to link onto. It's a nice test post sticking out the ground there, a nice connection point.
Yeah.
We know from our experience that a lot of contractors don't use the jenny, and that's the most important part of the kit. And something to make it easy for them. The test post is right there just to link onto, you know, and that can mark out those high pressure pipelines pretty easily before they come. You know, most of those.
Absolutely, mate, and that is, and it's a fundamental part that's covered in the supervisory check as well. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that it's constantly checked when they're being supervised on that particular thing as well. So yeah, no, great question. No, thanks.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks both, and we've got Toro with his hand up as well.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for a very good and very interesting presentation. I was just wondering, and also first I'd like to say that I think it's really good to see that Openreach places those requirements on the contractors. I think that's really the key, having the client actually showing the same kind of interest and care about safe excavations for the contractors. My question is, when you place these requirements on the contractors, do you see that is a price driving? Do the contractors say that this makes it more expensive? Because what I've heard from other asset owners is that once they try to place those kind of requirements, contractors end up having more rigorous processes and charging more.
No, so brilliant question, right? And it's, I think that would be the same for anybody. However, I think although the process is extremely stringent, what I've certainly found in my experience with it is that it actually makes you more efficient. So although there may be a cost, but most of these companies, right, most of our suppliers utilize their own system. So they've already got the system in place, but the actual process and the stringent process makes them more efficient. You know, so it's generally harder to try and circumnavigate something as opposed to following the steps that are there to aid you. Makes them more efficient. So that's been my experience of it. Now there'll always, if there's a bit of an increase in cost, if they've got to purchase a system, there's always that, but they always see the buyback from it.
Excellent. That's exactly my experience as well. Is that it actually helps them develop their practices really to become more efficient and stops delays in the work from strikes and all other kinds of trouble you can get into. Thanks.
Sure. No, good question. Thank you.
Thanks both. Murray, you had a hand up there.
I did, yeah, but I took it now. I was just going to chip in onto one of the previous questions, just from Luke Smith. We try to encourage people not to use our CP post to locate our pipelines. The only reason being is not that we don't think people are capable of doing so, but it's just some of the test posts can have different studs on the side for different assets, so they might not always be connected to directly to our pipelines. Various foreign services, earthing rods, ground bed posts, all manner of things. So I think the main thing is, when you're working near a high pressure pipeline, is to get the pipeline operator out to do that for you. Most of them provide a free service, but it's really important that probably not to use their test posts all the time to locate their assets.
No, it's fair point, Murray. Yep.
Thank you, Murray. And we have Jan Willem.
Thank you, Fion. Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom. I like the presentation a lot, by the way. My question is basically around, you have a lot of contractors working for BT. But do you have kind of a rating where, let's say, if people don't follow rules, that if they, let's say, go under a certain rating, that they can lose the contract with BT?
So I think that's probably not necessarily a question that I can give you a solid answer on this. However, what I will say is we do measure the performance of our suppliers. Okay. Maybe a bit of background. I'm from the Netherlands. We have here some processes which are about connections and about new ducts. In general, that's for all utilities, by the way. And basically, that's a complete digital process. Also, the house connection process, basically, that's completely measured. And in fact, they go a step further in the future. It has to be centimeter accuracy, whatever they do, contractors. But it also includes the way they supply data back to the utilities or the telecom providers. Is that all the metadata has to be correct, and if it's not correct,
it will be sent back, and if they, let's say, go over a certain of errors, they can lose their contract basically in that certain region. So here, a contractor will have a kind of a concession basically over a period of time, but they can lose that concession if they make too many mistakes basically.
Yeah. So we do have something similar. Obviously, like I said, I can't go into detail on this call, and unfortunately, it's above my pay grade there. But we do have those facilities within Openreach. We have certain contract levers and stuff like that in place. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Thank you, Jan Willem. Thanks, Tom. We have some questions in the chat as well that I'd like to put to you, Tom, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, that's fine.
The first one in came from Tom Cummins, who asked why Openreach allow utility contractors to open lay their fibre. So he says, for those working in the area, once the services have been laid, the task of locating these services is more challenging than when locating ducting.
So what we're talking about when the contractors to put fibre in the ground on our behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, they should be using the metal stripping over the top. So if that's not happening, if that's something that people are experiencing and that they're seeing when they're going out and tracking and locating our new equipment, then that's definitely something that I can take back, and our network assessors. So we have a network assessor team that will go out and sample check. Unfortunately, I'm not sure. I don't think they can do 100% check on the supplier's work as part of agreements and stuff like that. But again, that's not something for this call. But there is a large sample check of all works that's completed. But that's something I can certainly feed back if you're experiencing issues around being able to track and locate newly laid services.
Thanks, Tom. And we'll share these questions with you at the end, because I don't think there's quite a lot and we won't get to all of them.
Are they all positive?
Oh, well, almost all. There's one that I'm certainly going to put to you, which is obligatory for Openreach attendees on LSBUD calls, but we'll come to that.
No problem.
We had a question from Martin Robertson, who asked, this was specifically when you were talking about the hot job processes.
Yes.
About what timescales apply to this process, and also if you have a list of assets that are considered as a hot job that apply to the process.
Yeah, so obviously, so I'll address the last bit first there. So a list of assets that are considered hot jobs. So it's your high and intermediate pressure gas, obviously your high pressure pipelines. We also include in there extra high voltage and your high voltage cables. And we also categorize high pressure water mains and large diameter water pipes as hot jobs, but we also include in there the various different fuel pipes as well. So anything that's considered high pressure, so whether it's aviation fuel or whether it's a high pressure chemical pipe, they're all considered as hot jobs. And there's some other bits and pieces there, but without straight off the top of my head, they're the main ones that we're looking at as a hot job. And sorry, what was the other part of that question?
It was just about the time scales that apply to the hot job process.
Yeah. So when something's identified as a hot job or in the vicinity of an HPP or another high risk asset that I sort of mentioned there, we'll add an additional 5 days to the required by date for that particular task. However, that doesn't mean that if there are delays because maybe we're waiting for prints or we can't get a meeting with the asset owner until a particular time, the days can be added, but we preset an additional 5 days onto that task.
Okay. Yeah, it makes good sense. Thank you. We had a question from Tim over at Atkins, and Tim asked a question while you were talking about the supervisory processes, and particularly for how you're training staff and contractors. Sure. And he asked if you're able to share the training questions that you put to them.
So let me. I'm more than happy to share stuff. However, I'm not in a position to say I can give them to you right now. Let me take that away. I'll have that discussion, and what I can share, if I can share, that is I will do it via you guys, Theon, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine, Tom. Yeah,
But
thanks for
I'm going
considering
to
it.
sit here and say yes, but I certainly will go and ask if we're allowed to do that.
No, that's absolutely fine and understandable. We've got a hand up from Mike Bartlett. Mike?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just picking up on a few points throughout. Really enjoyed it, very useful. Particularly, I work for Kia, so from the contracting side of working on clients' assets.
Yeah.
BT Openreach's view on providing that information up front is refreshing, to be honest. It's good. They're good to hear. Just on training and supervision, something we've gained huge value from is proactive Cat and Jenny conversations. A number of people have mentioned a lack of Jenny use, which is very evident. What we do for all of our teams is we download their Cat and Jenny data, which gives us time in each mode, swing warnings, which allows a proactive conversation outside of any strike or near miss to improve it. So you mentioned, Tom, rewarding good behaviour. That also highlights great Cat and Jenny use as opposed to just picking up on service strikes and incident investigation. So quite a good proactive piece that's available for everyone off the back of their data from their Jennies and Cats.
No, that's brilliant. No, that's brilliant. And I was recently down at your offices. I actually carried out an audit with your guys and girls. Probably it was definitely within the last 6 months anyway. It was a bit of a whirlwind, didn't it, with COVID? But I've been down to your offices in the last couple of months, so.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant. We'll take a couple of more questions before we let everyone go about their days. We had a question just in from Torre, who asked, to what extent do Openreach assist third-party excavations in locating Openreach assets?
Right. So our prints are widely available, and we're more than open to sharing that information with anyone that requires it. All you'd need to do is contact Openreach, and we're more than happy to assist and share that information. Now, we also have our own plant protection officers that, if at a request through the correct avenues, can actually come out and mark up our service. So we actually provide that as well. So not only do we provide our prints, we actually provide, in some instances, manpower to mark up our services for you. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, very good, Tom. There's one more. There's a question I've got to ask you this, because this is the one I mentioned that gets asked to all of the Openreach attendees on whoever come on our call.
Tom, I reckon I know what's coming.
Yeah, Tom Cummins asks, are Openreach assets part of LSBUD? He goes on to say,
you know the answer to that. So you can answer that question, can't you?
I could answer that on the second part.
No, ultimately, okay. So there's two parts to it, right? And the first part I've already just answered there, right, from that last question. We are more than happy to share our information with anyone that requests it, and like I say, we've also got people that can come out and mark our services up for you, right, using the correct avenues and channels. But there is also, which isn't really for this call, and I'm not really in a position to sort of discuss it personally, but obviously there's also commercial reasons with everything that's going on around full fibre rollout and everything else. So there are commercial reasons as to why Openreach aren't members of LSBUD. However, we are massive advocates of the system. You know, I wouldn't be stood here today having this conversation, sharing what we do with everybody, you know, and we encourage the use of it with all of our suppliers as well. But like I say, we are always more than happy to share our information with anyone that asks for it.
Yeah, which is very much appreciated, and certainly we see the usage that comes through Openreach, and it's extremely heavy. So very much appreciate that, and appreciate your candid answer, Tom.
No, you're welcome.
Sorry, just on that, apologies. My name's Tom. I'm from C3 Construction.
No worries.
Tom, you've mentioned there that you make these drawings available.
Yes.
Whereabouts can we get these? And I think part of the question as well was, are they free of charge? You have mentioned a lot about work safe, home safe. The big thing that we got here is making sure everyone knows exactly what's in that ground.
Yes.
So whereabouts can we get these?
So you should be able to apply for these directly off the Openreach website. Now, what I can do for you, Tom, and everyone else on this call is I can share that information directly with FIOM, and I can make those links to the specific landing pages for that, and provide the relevant contact numbers should you need it, if that helps.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Have I answered all the questions like a good politician?
You've done very well, Tom. There are actually quite a few more, but I think we'll take those offline because we're getting near the end, and I don't want to impact too much on people's days.
No, Fionn, if we do that, that'd be brilliant, because I got spammed yesterday to present something else about 9:30. So yeah, if we could do that offline, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I just want to say before we end, a massive thank you to you for the time and effort in presenting that. I think I can speak for the amount of questions we had is the most we've had. So you clearly got people thinking, and it was a really sort of thought-provoking session. So on behalf of LSBUD, just a massive thank you to you for that.
No, you're welcome, and it was a pleasure to be able to share with you some of what Openreach are doing, and this is definitely something that is really, I'm going to coin the catchphrase, please don't shoot me down. It is something that's really close to my heart, right? Given previous experiences and stuff like that. So it was an absolute pleasure to come on and talk to you all today, and I really hope that you took something from it. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, so thank you.
Much appreciated, and to everyone else, thanks so much for contributing and for all of your questions. To those we didn't answer, apologies for that. We will come back to you once we had a look through them, and really, as always, we welcome feedback on these events. There's an email address there on your screen, marketing@lsbud.co.uk, and we welcome any feedback, good, bad or indifferent, that you have for us. We'd usually at this stage advertise the next session. We have got a couple of irons in the fire, and we're hoping to have one on Thursday the 29th of April, which we'll advertise through the usual channels. If any of you have ideas or topics that you'd like us to cover, then again, please hit us up on that marketing email address there, and we'll very happily have a look at them. So for now, thank you very much for attending this morning, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks very much,
guys.
Tom.
See ya. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.